Evening and welcome to the Further Maths Applicant event. My name's Simon. I'm the head of maths here at Reigate College. We've got a pretty full-on hour for you guys. We've got a group of students here, all Further Maths students, who are here to answer any questions you might have, give their thoughts about studying further maths here at college. So before we get going, just a couple of points. If you have any questions that you think of, you should be able to type them in the Q&A function on Zoom. If they are really, really specific, they might get answered by our student panel in the Q&A chat function itself, or we'll answer them at the end when we get some chance for questions. So just very quickly, I'm just going to get our student panel to introduce themselves, starting with Eden.
Hello, I'm Eden. I went to De Stafford School in Caterham, and I'm currently in lower six studying maths, further maths, and classical civilizations.
Hi, I'm Aaron. I went to the Beacon School. I'm currently an upper sixth student who studies maths, further maths, computing, and economics.
Hi, I'm Libby and I went to Wizcote and I'm currently in the lower sixth studying maths, further maths, physics and computer science.
Hi, I'm Max. I went to the Carrington School and I'm currently in the lower sixth studying maths, further maths, philosophy, and physics.
Thank you. As I said, you'll have a chance to hear from our student panel later on in this session. So let's going. So first off, to answer maybe the biggest question we get asked is, what is further maths? So further maths is a second A level. You take it in addition to maths A level, not instead of. It's designed to complement the maths A level and really deepen your understanding of some key mathematical concepts and advance the maths that you do at the A level in a really interesting way. Other topics that you do won't necessarily link directly with the maths A level and are very, very distinct, but are very different in a really interesting way. In order to study further maths here at college, you need to have a 7 at GCSE maths, and we do not require you to have done GCSE further maths. If you have, that's great, but we know that some schools don't offer it, so we don't want to exclude students who maybe haven't had the opportunity to do it. So why would you want to study further maths? Well, the principal reason is you really enjoy maths, you find it fun. And this is kind of one of our unofficial entry requirements to some extent, because the way we structure further maths here at college. If you choose to take it, you're going to be doing 8 hours of lessons of maths per week. So it's going to be at least half of your timetable. So if you don't find it enjoyable, if you don't think that maths is a really fun subject, it's really, really hard to engage well with the course, and you might find that you don't enjoy it as much. So if you are sitting there thinking, oh, I'm really good at maths, but I don't like it that much, you can do further maths. I'm sure you'd be able to cope with it academically, but for you personally, it might just not be the best thing for you to do to enjoy your time here at college. There's nothing wrong with that. It's personal preference. But yeah, you've got to really enjoy further maths or enjoy maths to be able to do further maths. A lot of the content that we cover in the further maths syllabus is very quickly met at university. So if you're going to do a maths, physics, engineering, computer science, very STEM heavy based degree, some of the content that we do in the further maths A level will be present in those degrees. Most universities will start in the first year with a kind of introduction to those topics, but will go at a significantly fast pace. So having them done beforehand means that those units in the first semester of university are more revision. Some courses, typically maths courses, and I'll talk a bit about it a little bit later on, either require you to complete A-level further maths or prefer you to have done it. And at Reigate College, students who take further maths do well in their maths A-level. I've got the results from 2 years ago there and they are the same this year. In fact, the AA star number was higher in 2025 than 2024. But the message is that 100% of further maths students for the past few years have got at least a B on their maths A level. So it really, really does strengthen your maths and bolster your ability to do the main maths A level. Following us on some feedback from this talk last year, we had a few requests to go through a little bit more about kind of the content on both the maths and the further maths courses. So on the left of your screen is the content for the first year A-level maths. So you'll probably recognize a lot of these topics from GCSE. But as you get down the list, you might see some that you haven't seen before. And that's kind of the way the maths A-level is structured. Is the first term or so is a lot of GCSE recap and extension. We then have the stat and mechanics units, which are compulsory for A-level maths. The further maths, there's significantly fewer individual topics, so we get to go into them in much, much more depth, which is, I really like it. I really enjoy teaching the further maths, and I'm sure the students enjoy doing them as well. Some of the content, and I'll show you a little bit later on, we compare some maths versus further maths exam questions, do link with the maths A level quite well, but there are some, like matrices, for instance, that are completely distinct and are brand new, and you don't cover anything like that in the maths A level. The additional 2 units on the further maths, the further mechanics and the decision, are what are known as options units. Now, if you choose to do further maths, or if you have friends who do further maths at a different school, different college, they may not do further mechanics and decision. We have a choice. We choose to do those 2 units, mainly because the further mechanics is very physicsy, and a large proportion of our further maths students do physics. And then the decision, a large proportion of our further maths students do either computer science or economics, both of which the decision links with very well. So that's why we have chosen those, whereas other schools may do different ones. Going to the second year, on both sides, you can see there are fewer topics. So the second year is much more intense on the topics that we do. We spend a lot more time on them, and they are much bigger. Still the same kind of model with the maths and the further maths, with the pure stats and mechanics in the maths, core pure, further mechanics and decision in the further maths. The further maths, again, sees a lot more depth in those topics. For instance, differential equations we're doing at the moment with the upper 6 further maths, and I'm sure Aaron will be able to talk a little bit about that later on, but it's a topic that we spend two to 3.5 weeks doing because it is so big. The further mechanics does link really well with the physics. If you don't do physics, or you're not intending to do physics, it's not a problem. Okay, we will teach the further mechanics units and the mechanics in the maths as if nobody does physics, and those students who do have just seen some of those topics before. So if you're sitting there thinking, oh, I now feel like I need to do physics in order to do further maths, that's absolutely not the case. So I want to take some time to have a look at a couple of exam questions, and I'm going to go through these just to show you kind of the level of difficulty and the difference between the 2 courses. Both of these are taken from full exam papers. The left-hand one is from an A-level maths paper. The right-hand one is from a further maths paper. Broadly, they're similar topics, but you'll see kind of the level of maths is going to vary greatly between the 2. So, looking at this one on the left, we have 2 curves, and we have verify that when x is 1, these curves intersect. So a couple of different ways to do it. We can take these 2 curves, set them equal to each other, and find that x is 1, or a little bit quicker, when x equals 1, we can just work out the y coordinates minus 1 cubed. Student panel, I expect you to jump in if you see me do something wrong, please. And we get 8 minus 10 plus 6 minus 13, 14 minus 1 minus 10 minus 11.
Yes?
Yes?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, we've got some knots. In the second curve, x squared minus 12x plus 14. Oh, this is not looking positive. I've done something wrong. Where have I gone wrong? Oh, why have I got 13? It's 1 cubed, not 13. That makes a lot more sense. There we go. This is 14 minus 11. That's much more sensible. So we get 3. Okay, and we get 3 again there. So we now know, because we get the same y coordinate, that the curves intersect. Yeah, 1, 3. Okay. Then we have this second bit. These curves also intersect when x equals k. Use algebra to find the exact value of k. So I'm going to throw this over to our students, so I'm not doing all the talking. Any suggestions on what we do?
You could equate the two equations to one another, so get that 8 minus 10x plus 6x squared minus x cubed is equal to x squared minus 12x plus 14.
14, lovely, yeah.
That will be your first step. And then you could rearrange to get all the terms of x on one side.
Yeah, so x cubed minus 5x minus 2x plus 6 equals 0. Agree with that?
Yep.
Good.
Then the next step you would take would be to factorize the equation. So you know that when x equals 1, that is one of the roots. So you could have x minus 1 as one of the factors. And then you could form the other factors. You know that at the end of the quadratic you're going to end up with minus 6. And you know that it's single x cubed, so you're going to start with an x squared.
Yeah.
And then you'd need to figure out the final few terms in the middle. So give me a sec, sorry.
Yeah.
I've normally got my working written down, but
It's all right. It's all right. But
Anyone else can feel free to jump in and give Max a hand as well.
so then you would also know that you've got the minus 1 times the x squared. So you need a total of minus 5x squared. So you also need a minus 4x term.
Yeah, good. And then
Yeah.
So as Max rightly said, thank you, Max, for the contribution there. Well done. I'm just going to take out that for a moment. So the fact that we're told to find the exact value of k gives us a little bit of a hint that maybe it's not going to come out quite so nicely. So we know that x minus 1 gives us the one that we saw in part A. So that's going to give us that x squared minus 4x minus 6 equals 0. Okay, we're told that k is less than 0. So Libby, how would we go about finding our value of x?
You could use the quadratic formula. So minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And then you have b as minus 4. So it'd be minus 4 is plus 4, plus or minus square root of minus 4 squared, which is 16. And then minus 4 times 1 times minus 6 over 2 times 1. And then you have, so inside the square root, you have 4 times 1 times 6, which is 24. And then you do 16 minus 24
minus minus 24.
minus, oh, it's minus 6.
Yeah.
So you get 40 and then over 2. And then you can simplify the square root to get 2 root 5. Oh, 2 root 10.
10. Yeah.
And then over 2. And then you get 2 plus or minus the square root of 10.
Good. Thank you very much.
Excellent. And in the question, we're told that k is less than 0. So k must be 2 minus root 10. Lovely. Well done, team. Okay, so pretty long A-level maths question, pretty chunky there. We now move on to the further maths question, which student helpers wise, it's going to be pretty much Aaron, as our lower 6 further maths students haven't quite started the further maths content yet. They will be starting that in a couple of weeks' time. Okay, so I'll start off. Actually, Aaron, how do you feel about just taking this one all the way through? Yeah.
I think mentally I can do part A,
Okay.
if that's all right with you. So as we know, is we've already been given two the roots of the equation. One is a real number and one's an imaginary number. With imaginary numbers, they always come in pairs with complex conjugates. So the root gamma would always be 2 minus I. And as we know, this is a quartic, which is something you'll cover in the A-level maths spec. It's either they always have two conjugate pairs or one conjugate pair and then 2 real roots. But in this case, as we already have a real root, which is alpha, the root of delta must also be real. So therefore, it can't be imaginary.
Imaginary numbers and complex numbers is something we cover in the first year of further maths. It's actually one of the first things you do. So as Aaron rightly said, complex roots of what we call a polynomial match up like this, since alpha and beta form, sorry, no, not alpha and beta, gamma and beta form a conjugate pair, and alpha is real because it doesn't have a plus I bit. Delta must also be real. Good. So determining the value of delta. So this is using a second topic from further maths that's outside of complex numbers, which is about roots of polynomials. So you will learn that if we take all of the roots, alpha plus beta plus gamma plus delta, and add them together, we end up with minus 6. Now we're told what the roots are, so we get 3 plus 2 plus I plus 2 minus I plus this extra root delta equals 6. Plus I minus I cancel. We've got 5, 7 plus delta equals 6. Delta is minus 1. So that's using some properties of complex numbers and as well as properties of roots of polynomials. Now, determining the values of P, Q, and R is quite a lengthy process, using similar properties to what we've done here. So there are a few ways we can do it. The main one is that R is going to be all 4 roots times together. The other way to do it that I'm going to quickly do now is we know what all of the roots are. So we know that Z plus 1 from delta times Z, what was alpha 3, minus 3 times Z minus 2 minus I times Z plus, minus 2 plus I. All of this is going to multiply out to get to what we had here. By multiplying it out, we're then going to be able to very quickly compare and see what P, Q, and R are. I'm not going to go through this because we are, I don't want to spend the entire time going through questions. There's a few more slides I want to go through. So I will, as maybe parents who are confident mathematicians might know, I will leave this as an exercise for the viewer. Part D, writing down the roots of the equation. This is a topic that is from the maths that comes up in the further maths about transformations. So we can use the fact that we're transforming f of z into f of minus 2z to work out how we can transform the 4 roots of this polynomial that we already know. So these 2 questions are very, very similar in terms of baseline content. They're both about functions of x or z that have powers, which is a topic we call polynomials. Very similar in terms of finding roots, so solving equations, but just done in very, very different ways. Hopefully that was interesting. I'm aware that particularly with the further maths, there will be a lot of terminology there that you maybe haven't seen before, haven't heard before, and that's fine. Again, the complex numbers topic particularly is one of those topics that is for most students brand new when you start doing the A-level content. So a lot of the terms that Aaron used in his explanation for part A, you would learn as we go through the course. I wouldn't expect you to be able to do that from scratch. So back to our slideshow, and I can continue talking now about kind of what further maths can do if you're not thinking of doing a maths degree. So I've spoken to members of staff in other departments, typically STEM departments, to find out where further maths content from our specification comes up in the degrees that their students typically go on to. So if you're thinking of going to do a chemistry or a chemical engineering degree, there's a lot of elements of the further maths in there. Looking at sort of some of the advanced calculations in chemistry and engineering, there tends to be a lot of use of matrices. Computer science often uses a lot of complex numbers. And a lot of the content that we do in the further maths has direct influence and relevance to STEM fields of study. Some more than others, I'd say particularly the computer science, physics, engineering. But even if you're thinking of doing a STEM degree that's not one of those topics, STEM being science, technology, engineering, or maths, there is still a lot of overlap with the further maths. Looking here, so this data is a little bit old. However, this is the most recent kind of major study that has been done on use of further maths in degrees. And the table on the right, you can see that there is a huge number of courses that require maths as part of their study. Maths particularly, and you can see 30% of those maths courses either require or prefer further maths. Now, as I said, this data is a little bit out of date, and we are now seeing more and more non-maths subjects, particularly for Oxford and Cambridge, but even Imperial and kind of the top Russell Group and Sutton 30 universities requiring further maths for non-maths subjects, particularly things like natural sciences with the physics route or computer science. Just giving you some quotes from universities, from University of Cambridge. They expect or require further maths to be taken for maths, engineering, computing, natural sciences. You can see very, very high proportions of the colleges at Cambridge requiring further maths. And where so many schools across the country don't offer further maths, and their FAQ is, well, if your school doesn't offer further maths, you should be doing it anyway. At Durham, you can see they reference further maths in their course information or their prospectus. Imperial as well. Strongly encouraging applicants to take further maths at A2, so the full further maths, and further maths A-level being useful for mechanical engineering. And it continues. Okay. Glasgow referencing further maths for physics, but not affecting an offer. So they're saying it's useful, but if you don't do it, we're not going to penalize you for it. And there was a study done in 2014 about the use of further maths in economics, saying that there's a lot of it. A little bit more there. I've mistitled this slide, but that's okay. A few, because I've added a few quotes from specifically Trinity College there about the use of further maths in their courses. I'm aware that's quite small, but it's got a lot of information there. I just got this off Trinity College's website, so if you are particularly interested, you can go and have a look there. You can see for chemical engineering, computer science, economics, engineering, maths, medicine, natural sciences, all of them require maths. Medicine, maths is one of the options, and all of them reference, apart from economics, all of them reference further maths in some way, shape, or form. Okay, so it is really, really useful. And the final one there, LSE, is a desirable and acceptable for combination with maths and another A-level. So LSE specifically referencing the fact that they don't necessarily expect students applying for economics to do 4 A-levels. Most students here who do further maths will do 4 A-levels, but not all of them do. And you can see there, yeah, LSE saying, if you do maths, further maths, and one other subject, it's a good combination to do economics here. So we've got a decent chunk of time now for you to hear from our students. I'll ask them a few questions about kind of their experiences with college so far, and then we'll open the floor up to any questions from any of the people watching. So we'll get to those as and when. But yes, just to kind of summarize my final thoughts, the content of further maths is excellent preparation for many STEM degrees and economics. Some courses recommend further maths and may reduce an offer if further maths is included, and other courses may require further maths. Nationally, the number of students taking further maths is increasing. We're seeing that at college as well, where in the past couple of years, the number of students taking further maths has almost doubled. So it is a really big push nationally for students taking further maths. And what that means is if you're thinking of going to Russell Group, Sutton 30, Oxford, Cambridge universities for a very heavy STEM-based degree, you're going to be competing with people who do take further maths. You can also see the proportion of students on STEM degrees that have taken further maths is increasing as well. And that's as a result of it becoming a more popular subject. Okay. So I'm going to just put up on the screen a reminder about our student panel with their backgrounds and their subjects. And I'm just going to ask Eden first, because you can see compared to the other 3 of our student panel, Eden's doing maths, further maths, and classics, which is a sort of less traditional combination with the further maths. So how are you finding doing, first off, how are you finding doing 3 A-levels, not 4? And how are you finding doing a very humanities essay-based subject alongside the further maths?
I mean, first, I'll be honest, there isn't much overlap between the subjects I do, but it's quite nice to sort of have a break from doing maths constantly. Well, I absolutely adore maths. It's like my favorite subject, but it's just quite nice to sort of have that, like having something else to do, sort of like to break up what I'm doing in my sort of revision and sort of like the work I'm being set. It's quite nice to have that sort of break. And I find, because I'm doing an EPQ as well, which is something that you'll surely learn about if you're doing Aspire. It's quite nice that I'm not doing 4 subjects, so I don't feel so overwhelmed. because for a lot of universities I've been looking at, three's fine. I don't need to do four for what I want to do. So for me, like going through my interview process, I knew that this was sort of the right decision that I wanted to make for me because I find it I'm not like juggling too many plates.
Lovely, thank you. You mentioned an EPQ. Can you just quickly explain what an EPQ is?
So an EPQ or extended project qualification is equivalent to half an A level. You will learn more about this in Aspire, and it's sort of a research project that you undergo either in your second or first year for some. You sort of look at a topic that you want to learn more about that might be related to a degree you want to do, and you sort of produce either an extended essay or an artifact. We talked about one earlier before the session about what other students have completed. So they're looking at engineering degrees. Like one built a drone, another built an alarm, a kettle tea clock, which is quite cool. A kettle tea alarm clock, which is quite cool. So it's something. It's very sort of free to do what you want. Just sort of look at something that you quite enjoy and be able to sort of turn that into half an A level. It's great.
Lovely, thank you. Mr. Reiner, there should be a Q&A option. If you can't see it, it might be that you have to select the more option to be able to access it there. So please do add some questions to the Q&A if you do have any there. But in the meantime, I will over to Libby and Max. Both of you are doing physics. How do you find the overlap between the maths and the physics?
I think with maths, especially in the mechanics, when we go over the mechanics, physics, we've already covered it a lot in physics. So when it comes to maths, you're ahead of a lot, even though they like recover everything because quite a few people still haven't done it. Like we know what will come up, and it's very helpful because then we like are already ahead of the topics that we're going to cover, and then you can like focus on like expanding on like the harder questions.
I'd very much agree with what Libya said there, that it's really helpful, especially with if there's a few topics that you're struggling a bit with. I know that there were one or two bits of the mechanics that I was struggling a bit with in physics. So going over it again then as part of the maths, and then knowing that I'll go over some more of the mechanics as part of the further maths is definitely helpful and key for revision of some of the trickier topics in those areas.
Thank you. And kind of on the other side of that, Aaron, you're in your second year. You've done kind of the first year of maths, the first year of further maths, and you've pretty much you finished the second year of maths now. You don't do physics. How have you felt hampered by that at all, or how have you found kind of your program fitting together with the further maths?
Personally, I found mechanics the hardest out of all of my topics of maths because in my first year class, I was unlucky placing a class where a lot of people took physics and they were all speeding past with my answers. But over the time, I found it all right. As Simon did say earlier, you do learn it from scratch. There's no assumed knowledge of physics when you start maths. So it is just a great learning experience. You do get to learn. And in the further maths course, you do learn further mechanics, which helps build upon your year one maths knowledge.
Great, thank you. A couple of questions now coming through in the Q&A. Thank you. As I said, you might get a typed answer from some of our students, so do keep checking back if you've put something in. A question we often get is about the gender split in further maths classes. So I think probably Libby is going to be the best person to answer that. How are you finding kind of the gender split in further maths?
When I first took further maths, I was expecting for it to be a lot less girls than boys in the class. But in my class, there's 8 girls in a class of 20. So it's a lot more mixed than you might expect it to be, which I really think is quite good.
Lovely, thank you. Yes, I have done some a breakdown of the statistics for all of our students doing further maths, and we're seeing it being approximately a 30-70% split girls to boys. in our further maths, but it is a little bit unevenly distributed between the classes. As Libby said, her class has 8 girls. My other further maths class that I teach in the lower 6 has 3. So it is a little bit of a unbalanced mix, but we do try and ensure that there's not a single girl in one class, because that's not fair. Another really sensible question has come through for Aaron and Libby. How is the overlap between computer science and maths and further maths?
So there is actually an overlap between maths and computer science, but it only really appears in your second year of computer science, where you learn like graphs and modeling of data, where this overlaps with the decision maths part of further maths. And it is helpful as it simplifies the topic, as that topic can be quite difficult for computer science students. And as I've already learned in further maths, it's really made the journey a lot easier.
In the first year, as Aaron said, the topics aren't completely overlapped, but it's really helpful with like mental maths. So in computer science, when you're doing like binary addition and like all of the conversions, it's really helpful because you can do it really quickly, and then it helps you like build up to like doing them more complex.
Right. Next question that's come through, can you do an advanced maths AS? So the further maths AS, we do offer for students who start at college on 4 subjects and then maybe find the workload of 4 subjects a little bit challenging, or realize that they really enjoyed maths, but it's not necessarily something they want to go and do long term. And those students will have the option to sit an AS in further maths at the end of the first year and then continue into the second year just on maths. Aaron, I know one of your friends has done this. How have they found that kind of transition?
So yeah, they found the journey quite simple. As Simon said, it's quite a simple process. You get in touch with Simon and be like, okay, I might find this a bit difficult, or I don't really want to continue it due to like aspirational reasons. And you already learn all of your maths content you need before your regular progression exams, which are in April. So you have plenty of time to prepare for the AS exam before you sit it in May time.
Right, thank you. Unfortunately, while we would love to be able to offer further maths as an AS to students in the upper 6 who are on 3 subjects and don't do maths, we're finding more and more with the popularity of further maths and the need for our teaching staff. It's just not something we are able really to offer for our upper 6 students anymore. If we can, we will, but it's not a guarantee. I'd say the best thing is if you're interested in further maths and you're thinking, oh, maybe I'd like to do it, maybe I'll take an AS, start on it. And then, as Aaron and I have already said, you can choose to drop it down to maths at the end of the first year. So next question is, I think for every single one of our student panel, how does further maths A level compared to GCSE further maths? Eden, when you take us with us, when you did you do GCSE further
Yeah, I
maths?
did do GCSE further maths. I was in fact just typing responses to that question.
Okay.
But yeah, I did GCSE further maths. It's definitely quite helpful in sort of introducing topics that you'll then look at in much more detail during the A level, but it's not a requirement at all. Like you're not going to be in way of your depth if you didn't do it. But it's sort of the idea that was talked about earlier, sort of like familiarity, sort of knowing the concepts that you'll then look at in much more detail. So yeah, sort of build sort of a foundation that can then be built on to sort of look at like hard topics in detail.
Thank you. Do any of you guys have anything to add to that on top? No? Okay, that's fine. Okay. Before we started the webinar, we were actually discussing this with some of the students as we go. Is the workload of 4 A levels manageable? Do you still manage to have a life outside of college?
I In the day, so I come in every day, which people with 3A levels don't, like, they normally have at least one day off. But in the day, I still have a lot of breaks and I do a lot of sport outside of school and in school. So I still have a lot of time to do other stuff, even with the 4A levels.
Again, I feel I'm very similar to Libby. I feel that as long as you have good time management skills and use your breaks in your timetable effectively, the workload for 4A levels, at least for me so far, hasn't been unmanageable. And in fact, I've still managed to have time at the weekend to revise and do any free time activities that I feel like doing. And in fact, I do athletics 3 times a week, so that can be for 2 to 3 hours at a time. So in terms of still having a life outside of your studies, I feel that absolutely that is still possible if you're doing 4A levels, but you do need to have good time management skills and get on with work when it's set.
So yeah, further on from Max's point, in second year, it also is essential that time management is kept well up and you could just manage 4A levels fairly well. You also will have plus lessons as well in the second year and towards the end of the first year, which are an extra 2 or 3 hours on your timetable of lessons, depending on how many subjects you do. So yeah, as long as you're good time management, you stay on top of your work, you have plenty of time in the evenings and weekends to do whatever you like to do.
So a couple of questions for me for now. So what grades do most students taking further maths achieve at GCSE? So the majority, although 7 is our grade requirement, I will be honest that the majority of our further maths students have an 8 or above at GCSE maths. We do have students with a 7 in GCSE maths doing further maths this year, and they are managing fine. But as kind of maybe you've gathered from our students so far, it's all about your effort and your attitude towards your studies. If you're willing to put in the time, there's no reason you shouldn't be doing well. Overall, in terms of a GCSE average, it does vary quite a bit because we do get students who have really strong maths and sciences, and then maybe their written subjects aren't so strong, so it pulls down their GCSE average. But we do typically see students doing further maths with a GCSE average of 6 plus. Typically. So not saying you can't do further maths if you aren't at that position, but it may be that yes, you could do further maths, but potentially doing 3 different subjects, one of them being maths, would be a better fit for you overall. Another question, is further maths essential for an engineering degree? Absolutely not. Okay. Further maths is not essential for most maths degrees. It's very, very useful for maths, science, engineering, technology degrees, but is not essential. I have friends who I lived with at university who did engineering. One did it with further maths, one did it without, and both found it a challenging degree course, but it is by no means an essential thing to do, but it is useful. Going back to the GCSE, only if you guys are feeling that you would like to, would you be able to share sort of broadly what you guys got at GCSE, but only if you're comfortable doing so.
I don't mind. Do you want me to do all my A levels or just for first subject maths, I got an 8 in maths, and then I also did further maths, and I got a 7. Sort of other subjects, I got a 9 in language, English language, 8 in English literature, 8 in drama, I remember now, 8 in geography, 7 in Spanish, 6 in RE, and then a 3 in art. But don't need to talk about art. Not relevant to the subjects I do, so don't need to talk about it. But yeah, those are the sort of subjects I got.
I also got an 8 in maths and then 7 in further maths. I got a 9 in my computer science, and then overall I got an average of 7.2 across my 10 GCSEs.
I got a 9 in normal maths, I got a 9 in further maths, and then in English literature, I got an 8. In English language, I got a 7. In PE and business, I got an 8. Oh, it's hard to remember them all now. What else did I do? In history, I got a 6. and in Spanish I got an 8. And then in the sciences I got 1 7 and 2 8s.
For the subjects I'm doing, I got a 9 in maths, further maths, and physics, and I got an 8 in religious education, which is sort of the closest that you can do at GCSE to philosophy.
Lovely, thank you. We got another question similar to the engineering. Is it essential for astro engineering? Again, absolutely not. It's really, really useful, and there will be a lot of students on those courses who've done further maths A level, but absolutely not. Aeronautical, not astrophysics. Both astro and aeronautical. Yeah. Generally, for engineering degrees, you will see a lot of students going to engineering having done further maths, but it is not going to be a requirement. It's definitely not essential. I think top universities will strongly recommend you do it because there will be a significantly large mathematical proponent to those courses, but is by no means a requirement. Same thing for kind of economics degrees, computer science degrees, other types of engineering. It's not going to be a requirement, but maybe recommended or liked by the universities. I'm going to open Q&A now. Okay, thank you. For GCSE scores, do we only look at maths or others? So in terms of looking at students applying for further maths here, we only look at the math. Because, as I said, we do appreciate some students who are very, very strong mathematically, but maybe find the more humanities-based subjects, like the Englishes, things like that, more challenging and may do less well in those. So we will look at the program overall, mainly for those students who are intending to do 4 A levels, so maths, further maths, and 2 others. We will look at the overall GCSE average, just because it's a concern to us. We don't want to work you. We want to make sure that you are not overworking yourself, making yourself unwell or stressed out too much by your A levels. But provided you qualify for the courses, we only look at the maths A level. What's the GCSE grade for just maths? It's a 6. Okay, so 6 for maths, 7 for further. I'm hearing a lot of piping, which is nice. Are you expected to have experience in A level and further maths before you join, or is the whole syllabus taught? No, the whole syllabus is taught. The whole syllabus is taught through the course. So yeah, we don't expect students to come in with a knowledge of A level. Some do. Some students do choose to do that, but that is their personal preference. It's absolutely not a requirement. How are we going on? Okay, I'll carry on. Just going back through those. Is it helpful for PPE? So PPE is a bit of an interesting one. It's because PPE, specifically at Oxford, I don't know about other universities that may offer PPE, but we have had students on further maths applying and being successful to a PPE course. However, is not a requirement. Maths is, I believe, but further maths absolutely is not. Last year we had, I think, 6 students apply to PPE at Oxford, and all 6 got an offer and made their offer. I think one of them did further maths, the other 5 just did maths. So again, it can be useful, but the PPE course, the economics is the smaller part. They're more interested in the politics and the philosophy side of things. So whereas maths is useful, or further maths is useful, for PPE, it's absolutely not a requirement, but could well be very useful. Right. Done that one. How's the overlap between physics and further maths? There seems to be a strong link. I think we've answered that already. There is a strong link. The reason we pick the further mechanics unit is because a large number of our students who do further maths do physics. But as Aaron's already said as well, even if you're not doing physics, we assume that nobody does physics, and so that everyone's on an even playing field, because otherwise it's just not fair to those students who don't do physics if we just go, oh yeah, you've done this already. Is there any overlap between further maths and economics A level? Aaron, this is probably one for you to answer.
So in the A level, there isn't really much overlap, as economics A level is more of an essay subject. So you're writing about graphs, you're like talking about economic problems, whether it's at a degree where I'm hoping to study, there is a lot of overlap between like the further stats modules, where which you don't study here, but a lot of the further maths knowledge and your regular maths knowledge will significantly help you with the econometrics part of your degree.
Lovely, thank you. Just looking through the questions, how is the workload of doing further maths as a fourth A level? I want to pick it alongside physics and economics, but I'm unsure if I'll be able to handle all the content. So 4 A levels, very challenging, but students who do 4 with one of them being further maths, how are you finding the workload of specifically doing the further maths?
Currently, I'd say that I'm not finding the workload too bad at the moment because, as I feel at the moment, quite a lot of the maths complements the maths really. So, because you end up doing so much more maths, your general speed at doing maths it gets a lot better. So, I can potentially end up spending less time than the 2 hours that it could take up to or is meant to take up to for the homework on some of the assignments simply because I'm doing that much more maths.
Yes, I know. A couple of quick questions. Is the AS worth half an A level? Yes. So why we don't sort of broadly offer it, and it's definitely not offered as a replacement to something else. Further Maths is the only course in the college where it is even possible to take an AS. And again, as I said, the only real way to do it is to start on 4 A levels and choose to drop the further maths at the end of the first year. Because as I've already said, if we are able to offer the further maths AS to students in the upper 6, we can, but it is becoming a much less common option for us. So yes, the AS is worth half an A level. And some universities, for not maths, but other STEM subjects, may take that into account when they're looking at your program. Is further maths competitive to get into? We do have a lot of applicants for further maths, and I think that this goes for the vast majority of courses at the college, is there's no competition. Okay, it's if you get the grades, we will try and make space for you. I've been working at the college now for 14 and a half years. I think in my time here, I have known of only one student who wasn't able to get their desired combination of courses, and that was because the combination was incredibly unique. It was kind of combinations where there was only one class in them, and those classes just happened to happen at the same time. So further maths is very popular. The class sizes are larger in some places than our maths courses. I think our biggest further maths class has 20 students, which is the class that Libby's in. But as long as you get the grades, we will make space for you. Another overlap question: how does further maths link complement with business studies? Business studies, not so much. A lot of our students who do A-level maths, not further maths, do business studies. And we do see sometimes some students on further maths do business studies, but the crossover is minimal between further maths and business studies. But it can complement it in the same way that maths complements business studies, particularly if you're interested in going into business, finance kind of areas beyond college. Further maths can be very useful. But I'd say if you are thinking of going down a more business studies kind of route, then do further maths if you enjoy it. But the A-level maths may be a better fit with a broader range of subjects. Are there people who choose further maths and pursue medicine? Really sensible question. There are some. I teach 2 lower further maths classes out of the 4 that we have here at college. I have 1 student this year who is intending to go into medicine. The students who are intending to go into medicine are typically academically capable of doing further maths, but we generally recommend that they don't. Not because they can't access the content, but more that there are a huge number of things that a student applying to medicine, veterinary medicine, or dentistry needs to do, that doing the workload of 4 subjects is very, very time consuming for those students, alongside the mandatory work experience, the ability to read and research and talk about developments in medicine, developments in biomedical studies, that kind of thing. And the workload of the 4th A level that no university really, other than Cambridge, even references for medicine, is usually not worth it, given that the top medical schools will be requiring students to get kind of 2A stars, 1A star, and 2As, that kind of thing. So although those students are generally academically very capable of doing further maths, it's our recommendation that they don't, because they need to concentrate on the 3 core subjects of chemistry plus at least 1 more science. But I'd say if you're thinking of going to Cambridge to do medicine, then very much further maths is a good option, because their medicine course is very much more theoretical. There is almost no practical element until the final year, and it's much more of a research heavy style course. How many students drop further maths during the first year? We generally see a very, very small drop off once the year has started. Our biggest drop offs in further maths tend to be right at the start, when students think, okay, I can do 4 subjects, and then they start doing 4 subjects and suddenly think, oh no, I can't do 4 subjects. And further maths for those students is often the sensible one for them to drop. But on the whole, we see very, very few students drop further maths throughout the year. Going back to talking about the AS further, the number of students choosing to do that at the end of the further maths does vary wildly from year to year. This year just gone, so the 2025 cohort, we had 4 students opt to do the AS further maths. The year before that, we only had 1. The year before that, we didn't have any. The year before that, we had, I think, 3. So it does vary quite wildly, but it's still quite a relatively small number of students. Broadly, the students who start further maths finish further maths. Some will choose to drop one of their other subjects if they realize, oh, I want to go and do a STEM degree. I don't need, say, history, and I want to focus on maths, further maths, and my other thing. Maybe it's physics, economics, computer science, whatever. But again, that is also quite rare. How many further maths classes do we have in total? So currently at the moment, we have 4 further maths classes in the lower 6th and 2 in the upper 6th. So even, I think 3 years ago, we had 2 in the lower 6th, 2 in the upper 6th. So further maths is growing in a massive way at college. What percentage of maths students take further maths? It's relatively small. So off the top of my head, in the lower 6, we've got total around 400 students doing either maths or further, and around 80 of them do further maths. So it's about 20%-ish. And again, that'll vary year on year. Okay. How many A-level maths classes are there? In the lower 6, including further maths, we've got 21, so 17 just maths classes. We are unfortunately out of time, so thank you very much for attending. Before you sign off, there will be, once we finish, there will be a survey that pops up on your screens. If you would take some time to answer those questions, we'd really, really appreciate it. It very much helps us develop this applicant event year on year. You're very welcome to contact me via the inquiries email or through the college. I'll be happy to answer any additional further maths questions you might have. But thank you for attending. A big thank you to our 4 students panels, our panel of 4 students. And I hope that this has been a helpful event for you. And I really hope that you consider doing further maths because it's a great A level to do. Thank you very much.